Hello, every pony. Alright, so as you all know, this is going to be another fanfiction reading. Today, we're going to be reading The Hoofwich Horror, which is based off of an H.P. Lovecraft novel called The Dunwich Horror, which I'm a big H.P. Lovecraft fan, because I got angry about the guy misspelling Cthulhu, but I really do enjoy H.P. Lovecraft, and well, I have high expectations for this, so some of you might be able to make the relations, others might not, and yeah, so here we go. Also, this is Twilight, but I'm going to read it in a manly tone because it fits better, so just remember that this is Twilight Sparkle. I'm just not going to read it in her voice because I'm lazy. Yeah. Dearest Luna, while I would usually write your sister about my adventures, I felt that only you could appreciate the experiences of which I am about to divulge. To protect Spike, I am using my own magic to inscribe this scroll, and shall be handing it to him just to send. It all began about a week ago, after our dinner on the bistro in Canterlot. After your carriage dropped me off in front of the library, I had stepped inside so as to do some research on that spell you were talking about. With Spike out helping babysit the Cutie Mark Crusaders at Rarities, it was left up to me to find the proper spellbook in the most ancient part of the old tree library. This meant going into the cellar. My hooves began to clop down the steps, the yellowish glow from the lantern I held with my magic casting an eerie glow upon the earthen and root walls of my tree's home basement. Unlike upstairs, where I could always hear the faint noise of the town, at this very late hour it was near silent. And, with the damp earth of spring surrounding me, even that noise was muffled to the point of being non-existent. I began to look over these rarely used bookshelves, the dusty tomes filling the air with the scent of mildew and rotting paper. Closing my eyes, I can still almost smell the scent, and it brings to mind the coming horrors of which I will reveal in due time to you, my beloved. It was as I walked down one of the bookshelves in the back of the room that I felt it first. A tug. Not at my gut. No, this was more like a pull at my very soul. Magic knows magic, and this magic knew my power. It called to me, almost begging me to examine it. If I knew then what I know now, I would have razed the entire underside of my house and been done with it all. But, being inquisitive to a fault, I foolishly looked towards my right to see a small red journal of some sort. Setting my lantern on the shelf, I then picked up the journal and slowly turned it in the air. From the outside, this little book looked like anything a rider pony would carry to jot down notes or story ideas. There was a simple gold latch on the front of the faded red leather cover. Turning the book over, I saw the spine in the back of the book were the darkest black I've ever seen under your night sky, as if the journal had been dropped into ink. I poked the latch with a hoof, and was surprised to find the old mechanism opened with only the faintest groan from its advanced age. I thought it might be locked, but was pleased to see otherwise. Oh, if only the book had been locked! I could have avoided going down the path of dark horrors which I fear I must now tell you about. But you know I never could resist any book, despite how much I should have ignored this one. Using my magic, I opened the cover slowly. As I did, the coldest of breezes suddenly whipped along the bookshelves, knocking down books from the shelves before hitting me with its full force. As the wind blew across me, I swear to this day I heard a female screaming. Shaking my head, I foolishly ignored the warning of this ill wind and looked back to the book to see what it said. Inside, I was amazed to find only 4 pages having been written in. The final page, bearing an oddly shaped black splat of ink, matching the spine and cover. I have since destroyed the journal itself, but attached to this missive are the copy I made of the entries therein. I know I am dead, or I am about to be. Nightshade warned me to run while I could. I just do not know how it got so wrong so fast. It started after Megan died in that accident. Danny was never the same. Never the same after that. I didn't know until it was too late that Molly actually had been working on the cult for years. Zeb was actually one of her first converts, as were the mice and rats, Few of us knew, really, until the raids began. It was 10 years after Megan had died that the first raid came through the Paradise Estate. Molly sat on a keg of witch brew potion being carried by the zebras and rats as she bellowed out her orders. It was then we found out everything. Every foe and enemy we'd ever faced was just a ploy by her to gather power. She held the Shadow Stealer in one hand, and a stick of metal that she used to inquire or kill with its magic any pony who dared stand against her. She claimed that she had found the true path of the ponies, and that she now needed us to follow her as our new goddess and ruler. Danny, bless his soul, stood up against her with some of the braver ponies, and he was one of the first to die. Oh, Dan Fortescue. His head, it just exploded from that metal wand she wielded to splatter brains and blood across the grass before she began maiming or killing the other ponies who stood with her brother. I am ashamed to admit it, but I ran. I ran and I ran, not looking back. As I ran, I could hear the screams of pain and death from my friends and family. But I ran to save my own life. As soon as I was clear of the town, I bolted towards the mountains. There was a cabin I knew of that I would be safe in. Once there, I collapsed into the bed and slept for what felt like hours. On waking, I found this journal while searching over the cabin for provisions. I'm writing down what happens to me as a record in case I can't survive. Someone must know what has happened. It's been 6 months since the raids began. From Paradise Estate now rises an acrid black smoke that never ceases, no matter what time. The sound of metal against metal fills the air every time I venture as close as I can to look for survivors. Those I do not see bolt from me, thinking me of part of the new cult, before I can help them. But perhaps it is for the best that I stay alone. I could use a friend, but I could use my life even more. I claimed the robe off a dead cultist. The poor Pegasus was ill-fitted to the changes and dark magics that Molly had placed upon him. Why he didn't go into the fire with the other failed converts I do not know. Perhaps he was searching for more ponies to convert when his heart gave out. Either way, I now have a way into the town to see with my own eyes what she has done. I'll go there after I practice to walk as the converts do. I write down the horrors I just witnessed for any survivors. I had seen some of the cult on the outskirts of Paradise Estate, but never had I been able to venture inside until today. It took me almost a month to walk as the cultists do without falling, but I know I would die instantly if I could not disguise myself. Walking into town, my mind reeled at what that witch had done. The sign for Paradise Estate had been taken down, and instead was a new sign made of bones that read, Hoofwich. Apparently, Molly felt her old name no longer fitting on a loving goddess. The ponies all around me no longer looked like ponies. Most had elongated forms, and magic had been used to reshape their hooves to mimic Molly's hands on some of the elongated ponies. Trotting through the town, I passed by a priest with a group of cultists gathered about him. So as to not seem out of place, I slipped into the group. The leader's speech was horrible. He detailed the gruesome slaughter of the impure flutter ponies and sea ponies, as they were unable to bear the change Goddess Hoofwich blessed her followers with. The cultists cheered as the priest described the last sea pony's death in the fire pit not even a week ago, and my heart ached. A sea pony had saved my life once, and to know it and its kind were dead filled me with such remorse. Outside, I cheered with the rest, but inside, I felt the pain heavy on my heart. As the sermon ended, cultists began to part to search for the impure. I slipped into an alley, swallowing hard as I wondered what kind of insanity could lead to this. I stood in that alley watching as those who could not bear the magics of the change threw themselves willingly into the fire pits. Their screams were almost as loud as the cheers as their impure were weeded out. As long as it grew dark, I slipped out of the town. Once out of sight, I could return to my normal gallop and quickly get back to the safety of my cabin. I've been followed. I know not how, but this time I've been followed. They brought a group with them, and they're currently bashing at my door. I can hear my wood splintering, the smell of scent, the blood from their weapons. Please, whomever finds this journal, You must stop Molly. She must be stopped. I may be the last pony who knew her before the change, and I know how far she has fallen. She must be killed for what she has done to her family and to Paradise Estate. The pages seemed odd to me. I've studied all the history of Equestria, and never have I heard such strange names such as Molly, Megan, or Danny. Nor had I ever heard of a Hoofwich or Paradise Estate. Closing the book, I lifted it with my magic as I thought about what it had said. Could this be merely some pony's attempt at a horror novel? It seemed almost too outlandish for even that, but the journal had mentioned zebras, and there was only one zebra I knew of. As I copied down the entries to paper, the frantic, almost illegible lettering of the final entry didn't match the earlier entry's calmer style of writing. Something had happened, and these yellowed pages were the sole witnesses. Closing the book, I noticed Celestia's sun has risen. Stretching my body, I knew I couldn't sleep until I talked to the one zebra who might have some insight I could not find in my books. Zecora. Packing up my saddlebags, I left Spike a note along with some rubies explaining that I'd gone to see Zecora. I put the journal in last as another cold chill ran down my spine. Since finding the leather-covered tome, I felt something was amiss in the air. Like a veil of sorts had been lifted from my eyes, making my way towards the everfree forest. The forest itself seemed even scarier than usual. Giving a swallow on its edge, I plunged into the forest. The journey to Zecora's cottage seemed longer, even if I know rationally that it took no longer. The eyes I always seemed to feel upon me in that forest could be felt ever more so than usual. All around me, the trees seemed to be even more frightening as I quickened my pace. The trees groaned, and the wind picked up, their branches beginning to swipe at my body as I bobbed and weaved down the path. By the time I reached Zecora's home, I bolted into a full run. I hit the door, banging with my hooves for entry as I screamed Zecora's name into the howling wind. So frantic was I that when she did finally open the door, I bolted inside and curled up in the corner. It was not my finest hour, but I was so terrified from what I'd read before. But this was not the end of my fears, but only the first taste of what was in my near future. Zecora tried her usual rhyming tone to console me, and slowly I began to calm down. As my breathing slowed, I mentioned I'd found a journal about zebras and needed her advice on what to do with the information inside. On showing her the book, she just laughed, until she took it in her muzzle. Spitting the book out quickly, I asked what is wrong. Covered in blood, this book was. Its metal taste made my tongue all abuzz. Her words stuck in my mind as I began to think. I had assumed all along it had been ink, but I remembered from my reading that blood gets oxidized, it gets blacker and blacker as it rots. Eventually, the blood takes on a blackness not unlike ink, with only a slight browning remaining. To reach this level of blackening meant the book itself had to be ancient. I used my magic to hold the book and open it, and Zecora began to read. At first, she was cheerful, and then as she turned the pages, a look of recognition and horror crossed over her face. Zecora knew what this journal was about. She knew, and I was going to make her tell me. It is just a story from the past. Someone's attempt at fiction that didn't last. Her tone was nervous, her breath rapid as her chest began to rise and fall as quickly as her beating heart. Zecora knew what was going on. She knew the fear I was feeling, and I was quite firm that I would not leave until she told me the truth. It took almost an hour of arguing and fighting, but eventually, she relented. I was deliriously happy at the time, but now I know I should have let the subject rest. The tale she spun was one of horror and woe. I sadly can't do her rhyming cadence and justice, so I must paraphrase the tale she spun for me. One of her ancestors had been one of the first converts to the cult of the Hoofwich, long before anyone even knew what was going on. He was the first to take on their odd practices of wearing clothes and walking on the hind two hooves exclusively rather than four. As I listened to her tale, the fear in my heart and soul grew. But this happened a long time ago, before Celestia and Luna's reign. Surely there is no reason to fear them now. I remember She looked at me at that moment, her eyes as cold as steel, as if they pierced my very soul. The magic they used was very old, and you should be careful not to feel so bold. They still exist outside the forest over there, and my family's post is to keep them away from any cult or mare. I shook it off, thinking that Zecora was putting me on again, or trying to divert me from the facts. My beloved, why did I not listen to her? Why did I not turn back while given the chance? My faith in science and my true magic made me think I was safe. I must research this cult. I must see if they really existed. My pride was my downfall, and no insistence from my zebra friend would deter me from my path. It took the longest time to coerce the location of that path to the village from Zecora. She refused for the longest time, but I kept telling her I was doing this to get information for Celestia. If such an evil existed in her realm, she needed to know so she could eliminate it. Oh, how foolish I was. I spun my excuses and arguments as the artisan of words I had become from reading so many books. And as she pointed a hoof in the opposite direction of the forest, I felt my heart swell with pride, while instead I should have just gone home and forgotten the entire thing. My pride was my downfall. This I know now. As I trotted towards what I assumed were ruins, I knew in my heart I would be safe. But that was my rational mind. The side of my mind that knew I was making a mistake screamed and rallied against me to turn back, to go home, forget this tale ever existed and let the evil lie. But I pushed those thoughts down, foolish as I was, to trudge onwards to my goal. I was a researcher, a documenter of the truth, and as Celestia's student and your lover, Luna, I had to discover the truth, not just for my own ego, but to protect those whom I cared for and the kingdom I call home. As I trudged through the forest towards my goal, I began to realize that all the sounds of life had simply stopped. I paused, looking about as I held my breath in anticipation. I still felt the ever-present eyes on me, but as for sounds of life, there was nothing. No birds, no roars of monsters, nothing. Even the rustling of the trees in this area seemed to be silent the closer I got to these ruins. It was as if the forest itself wanted to keep the outside world from whatever I was heading towards. The nagging voice in my back of my head replied to my skepticism. But then, as the silence grew to maddening levels, I heard the laughter of a child. But this wasn't the cheerful laugh like Apple Bloom or her friends would make while playing. It was a cold laugh. A laugh that chilled me to my bone, with its malice and dark intent. Soon, another laugh began. This one a male foal's laugh to my right in the bushes, and then another female laugh from behind me in the trees. Little pony, the words echoed out in their childlike tone amongst the giggles. I twirled about, suddenly realizing far too late I was surrounded on all but one side. The path towards the town's ruins. "Who's there?" I shouted, bracing my hooves in the dirt as the laughter and taunting grew louder. Little pony, come and join our herd. The Hoofwich needs your magic. She'll love you to death. I am ashamed to admit, I fell into that trap. I turned and bolted, running towards the town as the fear began to overtake me. I heard hooves to the sides of me in the bushes and behind me on the path, and I kept hearing the sounds of those voices. Little pony, magic pony, the Hoofwich needs you, they cried. I saw the edge of the forest, the end of the path ahead of me. Just a few more steps, a quickening of the gallop. Closing my eyes, I burst past the last of the trees and into the fading light of Celestia's day. The sound stopped as I stood in the clearing. Behind me, the ever-free forest seemed to close up as if depositing me to the fate I had chosen. Looking down, I saw an old sprawling village and farmland, and from the center of the town, I saw a sickening black spiral of smoke. I stepped forward nervously and felt something metal on the ground. Brushing with my hoof, I soon uncovered part of a metal sign that read, Paradise S. Giving an involuntary shudder, My rational mind tried so hard to calm myself as the fearful voice on the back of my skull begged me to go back. It was real. Everything in the journal. Everything Zecora had told me. The foals laughing, the warnings. Why did I not heed them? Why did I come alone, thinking I could brave it all by myself? I was such a foolish, prideful pony, and I felt as if I had made the most fatal of errors. At the bottom of the hill, I noticed several cloaked figures starting up the hill toward me. I reared, whinnying in fear, as suddenly I felt a sharp pain on the back of my head, but before I could do anything, I felt the icy cold blackness dragging my consciousness into the unknown. Well, my throat is really numb from reading in that voice, so I'm gonna stop it right there. It seems like a good spot. The scroll bar is about halfway through the page, so I think that should do.